cotton and dairy are linked at the waist in all of the cotton growing states that also have CAFO dairies, because they feed out. See, I mean, on cotton fields, 60% of the yield of a cotton field is cottonseed. And so that 60% of that yield has to go somewhere. And it used to go into oil, but cottonseed oil got to be very unpopular. And so like about 80% of that cottonseed gets fed out to dairy cows at 10.5 pounds a day. So, you know, if you go to a big dairy, they'll have mountains of cottonseed that they're feeding out to those cows every day. And so it's, you know, those two industries are connected. So.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture, all without synthetic fertilizers and toxic chemicals. You just heard from organic farmer Will Allen, whose longtime organic farming experience starts in California's San Joaquin Valley and eventually landed him just down the road from our co-director Dave Chapman in East Thetford, Vermont. As you'll hear, Will's story is a wild and juicy one, starting out with a short stint in jail, deep involvement in the farm labor movement, insightful data collecting into both chemically grown and organic cotton, and finally a book called The War on Bugs. Will was first drawn to organic food and farming while aiming to provide the most nutritious food he could for his 2 kids with muscular dystrophy, and he's gone on to serve as inspiration to a whole generation of organic growers through the practices he and his partners employ at Cedar Circle Farm.
Right about the time that I got fired, we found out that my 2 sons had muscular dystrophy. And so I had to make a decision. I was going to spend a year in jail anyway, because we got arrested for burning the Bank of America, which we didn't burn the Bank of America. All of the students had problems with the bank, and the bank was making tons of money by fleecing these kids, right? And so we found out that the bank was actually one of the vehicles for funding the Pacific Fleet. The money went through the Bank of America, and it was funneled to a lot of the stuff that controlled the Pacific Fleet was in a department store in downtown Santa Barbara, Ott's department store. And the computer program was in the basement of Ott's department store. And we found out about it, and we found out that what the bank was doing, and we just, you know, started giving speeches about it. And letting people, you know, people started having demonstrations about the bank. And then people started attacking the bank. And like every day, the windows got broken out, right? Every day. And finally, I think they ran out of that big glass. And they put plywood over the windows. And it was right at the end of a Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young concert. And the cops turned off the sound early, and people stormed out of there pissed. And they went and pushed a burning Dempsey dumpster into the front of the bank, and it caught the plywood on fire. And the bank burned to the ground. Fortunately, I was coming out of the concert, and I went into a sandwich shop. This is when I used to eat meat, and I had ordered a pastrami sandwich. And that is my alibi. And that was the alibi we used, because the shop owner was there when the guy ran in and said, "Oh, Bill, the bank's on fire." So it couldn't have been me. And they said that I had led people down the street carrying a Viet Cong flag and telling people to, you know, burn the bank, which never happened. I mean, and the cops said that they were right across the street and saw all this, right? So they were all perjuring themselves. But, you know, they have immunity. They can say anything they want, do anything they want, kill anyone they want, right? They did it then, they do it now, right? And so they totally lied about it, and they got caught because we got some good lawyers from Bill Kunstler, an old lawyer, got us lawyers from UCLA that were just crackerjack lawyers. And they said, let's try it through the American Association of University Professors, because I was a member. And then we'll find out we can actually do the same kind of subpoena of any kind of information. We can do discovery, we can do site visits, and that's what they did. They went out and did a site visit, and they made the cops come that said that they were across the street. And then they questioned them, and they totally busted their story. And then we were free from the burning the bank charge, because that would have been, I'd still be in jail. Because there's no statute of limitations. They could charge you any time.
Yeah.
But what happened basically is they wanted to get a pound of flesh, and so they got us for inciting to riot and failure to disperse and mischievous mischief and a host of little things that added up to 2 years. But they had me serve it concurrently, so it was just a year.
Yeah.
And then I got out some early because of my kids. My kids had, gotten muscular dystrophy, and I felt like I really needed to be with them more, and so I got it shortened a little bit. And but yeah, I was. But once they got muscular dystrophy, I realized, I had to figure out how to feed them better food and make sure that they had a long enough life that they could maybe figure out a cure, right?
Yeah.
So instead of going back into the university and teaching, which would have been probably a mistake anyway, I never would have been able to get a full professorship after, being accused of burning a bank, and after being in jail for a year. It's just like, people don't want to trust their kids with you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, and it's not just the kids, you couldn't get research money, right? So I decided, look, I'm going to go back into farming. And I'd already started doing a bunch of stuff. I'd rented a little piece of ground in Lompoc. So we started.
You're just rocketing around from like the Marines to academia professor to jail to like hand labor in the fields. This is quite a rocket ride. Now, Will, at this point, like, was farming? Were you excited about farming? Was this like, I want to do this the rest of my life, or was this just like one day led to another, and the next thing you know, you've been farming for 5 years?
That's kind of it. But I mean, a lot of it was like, once that community started building in California, right? And once I had gotten married again by that time, and I started working for my wife's father, because he had 3,600 acres, and so he did alfalfa and a lot of tomatoes, walnuts, almonds, a lot of peas, a lot of dry beans, and so I learned a lot there, just about the whole California ag system in the Central Valley. And we decided that we really wanted to get out of the San Joaquin Valley because it was getting so polluted with, so much toxic spray all the time. Where we were farming organically, there'd be 25 planes going over our farm every day, and they're leaking all the time. We knew that, you can see it. And
I think that people, I've said this before, in the Northeast, they actually have no concept of what that's like to be in that big ag country.
No, it's
which
like
is so chemical.
It's so chemical. I mean, the air is full of fertilizer. There's that much fertilizer. There's so many cows. I mean, it's just like, CAFOs everywhere, right? And total water damage. They've kicked them out of all of the Southern California counties. They've kicked them out. I think they're on the verge of kicking them out of Bakersfield, and they just keep moving north. And then now they're moving in North Dakota and
Idaho,
Minnesota, and Idaho, right? Exactly.
I have friends in Idaho complain about it. They said as California gets stricter, they all come here.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So we did that until we kind of just got tired of the San Joaquin Valley and wanted to be closer to my kids. And then in '88, late 88, we moved to Santa Barbara and took that job. And there it was really diverse with a lot of tree crops. Everything from mandarins to chirimoyas and avocados and peaches and then a lot of vegetables. And so I worked there for like 3 years, and I think it was about 3 years, and it was hard. It was hard, like working there, because it was a difficult farm um, on labor, and I had brought a bunch of labor with me from the San Joaquin Valley when I took the job, and so it was hard for me to see them not treated like I thought they should be treated. And so I moved back to the San Joaquin Valley and started growing garlic and other vegetables again, and got a place in Patterson, and then I got a job, part-time job with the California Institute for Rural Studies, and it was started by this guy Don Villarejo, who was another UCLA professor that had gotten fired at the same time, and he, like me, decided, instead of, like a lot of our colleagues, either went, and joined the Communist Party, or you know, one of the socialist groups, and we decided we wanted to do agrarian reform. We wanted to focus on, let's see if we can change ag and see if we can make a difference. And so he helped start a bunch of these organizations. He helped start CCOF. He helped start Ecological Farming Conference. And in those days it was called, what was it? Steering Committee for Sustainable Agriculture. And that's what lefties did. They had steering committees, right? So that was the Steering Committee for Sustainable Agriculture. Was how it started.
That's what grew into Eco Farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Villarejo was very influential and really bright guy. He was a physicist, like Vandana Shiva, who decided to go into agrarian activism, right? And bored with physics. Anyway, so he started this program at California Institute for Rural Studies, and he hired me to be the rural toxics outreach person. And then after we got another grant, he made me the director of that project. And we started studying, tried to figure out what were the entities in the state, businesses or crops, that were causing the most worker injuries, right? Because we're focused on, okay, how do we stop so many worker injuries? And two of them that came to mind were the nuclear transfer industry, as they're transferring all these spent nuclear fuel rods and taking them someplace to store them in water somewhere, right? And then the other thing that we're looking at, and there's a lot of injuries because there's such an enormous turnover of truck drivers, because they get zapped, right? They're driving these rigs that are peaking the Geiger counter at the third level, right? And so so we were studying that, seeing whether that was a thing that we ought to be focusing on as a rural toxics problem, or cotton. And cotton had by far the most injuries, of any crop and of any industry in California. And so we started studying cotton, trying to figure out what we could do to cotton.
Were these injuries from like pesticide exposure, or were these injuries from like knife cuts and things like that?
No, most of the injuries were pesticide related and fertilizer related. See, because anhydrous ammonia is really, really toxic, and a lot of people inhale it accidentally and don't have protective gear on. And then there are a high number of pesticide injuries, because they're, like before we started really working on cotton accounted for 50% of all the pesticides used in the world, right? And so we started looking at cotton and trying to figure out, well, what could we do? And we decided, well, let's see if we can get some growers to start growing organic cotton, and then see if we can get clothing companies to use it, right? So we got some pretty good grants, and then we got lucky because when I was, all the time that I was farming organically, I used the services of this guy, Larry Bowen, who ran Bow Biocontrol. And he taught me how to use beneficial insects to take care of my pests, right? And so one of the things we realized right away is like, well, I had grown strawberries a lot when I was in Santa Barbara, and the pests on strawberries are a lot the same pests that are on cotton, right? So we figured, oh, we took care of almost all those pests using beneficial insects on strawberries. Why couldn't we do the same thing on cotton, right? So we got Larry Bowen to help us out, and we started going around talking to farmers, saying, well, you guys be interested in using beneficial insects, and would you guys be interested in having us sweep your fields to see what's there so that you know what you need to get and you're not buying something you don't need, right? And so they were interested, and then we got a grant that let us take 30 acres of every cotton grower's field and use that as an example to them. They could grow organic cotton on that. We would take care of all the pest control on that. We would release the beneficial insects, and we would monitor those pests every week, right? So they would knew exactly what was in their fields, and we would teach them what we were finding, right? These are the pests that are in your field. These are the beneficials, right? So we did that for like 13 years, but we were able to do it that long because we got some money from Patagonia to do outreach to other clothing companies, and from Esprit to do outreach to other clothing companies to try to create an organic cotton market. And so we were able to get a lot of growers because we created a market, or we helped create a market.
Now, Rose Macario told me that there was a point at which Yvonne Chenard personally made the decision that Patagonia was going all organic on their cotton.
Yeah.
And he said it wasn't entirely popular with the board, but he had the juice, so that's what they did.
Yeah, and the way that happened is like Marcy Rudolph, who worked for Doug Tompkins, went on a tour with me. I showed her all the stuff that was happening out on cotton and how you could be out there like right now, from now until November, and there would be 8 or 10 planes you could see in the air, and they were defoliating cotton in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, all day, all night. Because there were like 1.5 million acres of cotton at the time. And so she came out there, and I took her on this tour that we staged. Because we created this sustainable cotton project out of the Rural Toxics Project. It started out as a Rural Toxics Project, and then we said, well, it's more than a Rural Toxics Project. It has more, and it's less than a Rural Toxics Project, right? So we renamed it, and that's what it became. And once we started getting into the clothing companies, then we were able to get some pretty good sized grants, and a lot of them were environmental grants that took place for the first time, really, in terms of they have all of these pollution controls, right? And the pollution controls are mostly focused on point source pollution, and that's usually factories or mills or fertilizer plants, anything like that is a point source pollution. Up until like the mid 80s, the mid 90s, they didn't do non-point source pollution at all, right? The EPA didn't fund that. And then Clinton was able to get non-point source pollution introduced, right? And we got a grant. It was a Cal-Fed grant. It was about $800,000 a year to try to teach farmers how to control their non-point source pollution, and farmers were non-point source polluters, right? Just like forestry is. You can't go find out if that tree caused this problem. That's the problem. Did this farm cause this problem? Well, we were trying to say these farms did cause this problem, because we were able to show, look, this is what's coming off of these farms, because we did a huge study of pesticide use, because California is one of the only states, along with Vermont, that collects pesticide use data, and it's collected from the farmers. So the farmers have to, when they buy that pesticide, they have a pesticide use report right then. So we mined that data and found out how much they were using on cotton, and it turned out, for a T-shirt which weighs about, bulky T-shirt like this weighs about a pound. It was taking 1.5 pounds of chemicals to make 1 pound of cotton. And we just started using that. We found all this data and we just started using it, right? And using it with these companies, right? And then we started doing bus tours. And Patagonia funded the bus tours, and Esprit funded the bus tours at first. And then Nike even funded the bus tours, and Levi Strauss funded the bus tours. And a lot of Levi Strauss Foundation money funded us, right? Because they wanted to change too. I mean, the people that, were the ultimate owners of Levi Strauss, they then had foundations, and they were progressive folks. They helped us a lot. So we did that for a long enough time where we had 15,000 acres in the program, and we had a staff of 39. And we were actually, we were probably the biggest IPM, biological IPM program in the country. Because it was like, you have 39 people working out here all the time, doing biological control, right? And then we got people more and more to do cover crops, right? And we started doing cover crop research with them, and we got a lot of help from this guy, Rich Smith, who was a ag extension advisor. He used to be in Stanislaus County, and then he moved to Santa Cruz County, and he became a real important advisor for a lot of organic farmers, especially on cover crops. So one of the things that started happening is the price of cotton dropped dramatically, because the world price of cotton dropped, and even conventional cotton you couldn't pencil it out. World price of cotton at one point got to 28 cents a pound. Right? It cost 72 cents to grow conventional cotton, and about $1.15 to grow organic cotton at the time, right? So we were trying to give people contracts where they could really make money, because you don't make a lot of money on cotton. I mean, if you're lucky if you pencil out, if you actually take home $200 an acre on cotton, right? And that's like 3 bale cotton, because the costs are so incredible, right? Of growing it, you've got to cultivate the devil out of it, right? And it takes a lot of hand labor, right? And so what we're trying to figure out is, well, how do you do less hand labor? And we figured out a lot of that. One of the things that we really had trouble with is defoliation, because they used pesticides to defoliate. They used arsenic and lead, and they used sulfuric acid, and they used a lot of DEF, which is an organophosphate, and so it's like that time of the year is like terrible in the San Joaquin Valley, and we were able to dramatize that, right? And get a lot of people involved in that program. And then when the price of cotton dropped, a lot of farmers went out of business, and they started planting pistachios and almonds.
Now the price of cotton dropped because they're growing it somewhere else cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about cotton is it's like an international it's one of the most traded items, and 56 countries produce it and trade it, right?
Yeah.
And some of them don't trade very much, but it's a significant part of their, foreign exchange earnings. And so when the price dropped, what happened is the organic companies kind of didn't keep their promise. They, went to Turkey and they went to the former Soviet Union, and they got QAI to certify stuff for them, right? And QAI is still doing it, and so they were able to completely depress the price, and they just flooded the mills in the United States with all of this foreign cotton that they could get for a much cheaper price, and so a lot of farmers couldn't afford to stay in the organic thing, and so not in cotton. So we advise them get in other stuff, right? And we kept the program going as a IPM program, and it's still running now as an IPM program. CAF, California Association of Family Farmers, took it over after we stopped doing it.
Yeah,
we transferred it, by design. We thought that they'd want to keep doing it because they're not organic purists,
right.
And we wanted the program to be organic, because that's what we felt like worked, because we'd seen so much damage from the chemicals, because like a lot of these guys in these, in the cotton gins, the cotton gin is just really a circular saw, right? And that cotton goes in between these two circular saws, and those circular saws cut the fibers off that seed, right? And so there are so many accidents with those circular saws. And there's so many accidents on people's feet because they bring in these 40-foot bales of cotton that are all packed together in a compressor. And they bring that in all at once, and then a guy stands on top of that with a vacuum about 5 inches in diameter and vacuums that cotton into the gin. And so he's standing on cotton that may have had a defoliant on him 2 days ago. And so a lot of these guys would lose toenails and then toes, and just an enormous amount of pesticide damage on the farm, at the gin, moving the cotton all around. I mean, it's just an incredibly toxic product. Still is.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah.
So after doing that for 13 years, we got this opportunity to come back to Vermont and help manage this farm that these friends of ours wanted to put together as kind of a farm that was really focused on building community or helping community grow around food, right? And so we found out from Vern Grubinger, who Kate was working with actually at the time at University of Vermont. He told us about this farm, and Kate and I were actually looking for a small farm. And he told us about this farm, and our friend said, well, let's do that farm and see if we can, help that farm, transition from chemical to organic. And so we got this place in 1st of November in 2000. And we'd been negotiating with the Bob and Marilyn Stone for this farm for almost 2 years. And finally we were able to, and he was a tough negotiator.
Bob is famously tough negotiator.
And Marilyn wasn't far behind.
That's right.
I'll say that.
I always said if I buy something from Bob, I know he's going to do well.
He's going to do well, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we got it, and we had a lot of pesticide stuff to clean up here. I mean, every bush hit a can, right? And every cabinet, had a bottle or two. And so that was like, and I came here and worked for the off and on for the year before we got the farm, because we'd kind of agreed that we were going to get it, but I was trying to talk them into using as few chemicals as possible, and that was anathema to them. They couldn't even think of it, right?
Now, had
And-
you written a book by then?
No, I was writing it.
You were
I
writing.
was writing it. I was writing it at the time. And so we actually hired them part-time for the first year to help us with transition, because I didn't know much about greenhouses. I was a field farmer in California, and we didn't need very many greenhouses because the season's so long. It's 11 months, and so which didn't make for many vacations in California. You got to be working all the time almost.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we got this opportunity, and so we took 3 years to transition it to organic, and then another 2 years to transition the greenhouses so that they were organically certified. But and so that once we got that together, and it took a long time to build a customer base. When we first got here, the second year, we decided we'd have a strawberry festival because we had a good crop, and we had 300 people at the strawberry festival. And the last strawberry festival we had about 4 or 5 years ago, we had like 1,900 people, right? And that consumer base started building, and we started seeing a lot more people coming here to hang out. It became like a destination, which is kind of what we had hoped would happen, and it happened. And we had certain people that were a little gnarly when we first got here that had been working for the stones that we kept on, and they drifted away, and we tried to replace that gnarliness, because I think it's a bad idea to wear a t-shirt that says, "Don't bother me, I'm busy," to somebody who's running a cash register, and that would happen. I mean, that's just not the way you do a business, we thought, right? And so once that kind of got fleshed out, that was good. And we've been able to hire really high quality people, that really, really, I've taken ownership of the farm, and that's been a blessing for us. And we, after about 4 or 5 years on the farm, we realized that we really wanted to start exploring some other ways to do certain things, right? And so we started taking some online courses on different things. And by around 2009 or 10, I think, I started hearing about, some of the stuff that Miguel Altieri was talking about. He was talking about these Brazilian cover crop mixes, and then Gabe Brown started using those cover crop mixes on his farm, and started feeling like they were really having an impact on the change in his microorganism level. So he started having a lot more diversity of his microorganisms. So we started looking at that stuff, and I went to a couple conferences that I saw he and Ray Archuleta do, and then Kate and I got a chance to go in 2015 to Costa Rica to the first Regeneration International conference, and there were people there from 60 countries, I think. It was pretty impressive. And the farm we stayed at had a farm manager, Steve Bowen, and he said to me, he said, "Well, if you're going to stick around for a couple of days after this conference," he said, "I want to take you over and show you a farm." And so he worked for Tom Newhart, and Tom says, "Yeah, take him over there and show him that. I think he'd be really interested." So Kate and Ronnie Cummins and I went with him, and we got to this guy's farm, and he was farming a hillside, really. I mean, like literally like that. I mean, he had tires you had to walk up to, find anything in that field or plant anything or harvest anything. But I stuck my arm in that ground, and my arm went up to here, literally up to there, and it was totally alive. Earthworms just pouring out of the ground, and like yields, super yields, right? And I said, man, you got something figured out here. And so I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, pointed down to this little spot of forest, little tiny little forest spot. He said, I go down there and I collect microorganisms on rice. And then I let that sit for about 7 or 8 days, and the microorganisms, completely occupy that rice. And then I take that rice and I weigh it, and I add the same amount of sugar as the rice weighs, mix it all up. I'm careful with it. I don't want to beat it up because there are living things there, but I mix it all up so the rice and all of these critters have all this food. And they eat up all that food, and then they go dormant, he says. And then I can just use those microorganisms anytime I want. And I've had it last for me for 2 or 3 years. And then he says, I make all these other things here. I make, this fermented leaf juice off of the fastest growing weeds on my farm. And I just take the tips and early in the morning, and then I add the same amount of sugar as weight to that, and then I ferment that for 7 days. And then I can store that in the refrigerator and keep it for 6 months and use it. And it's, I use it as a microorganism stimulant has these fast-growing microorganisms that are all in the tips of the plants. And he said I do the same thing with unripened fruit, and I use that to, stimulate ripening, right? And then I also use vinegar, and I make a fish amino acid myself. I also make that out of sugar and fish, and he says you use very little of this stuff, and he says it doesn't take very much, and he says mostly you're just trying to get the biology up. You're just trying to dramatically increase your biology.
That's great.
Yeah.
So that's kind of some of the future. From your perspective, if we step back and look, and you've got a lot of experience in California, and I don't, and you were there when it was beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I guess I was here when it was beginning in the East, but you really saw it. And when I was out there, I saw that the intensity of the agriculture is transformative to the whole culture of California.
Oh yeah.
In a way that Vermont is not like that. So you saw the beginning of certification. You saw the beginning of CCOF.
Yeah.
And you've seen a lot of changes happen.
Oh yeah.
So there are a lot of issues. Labor is a huge one. Obviously, the parasites are a huge issue. The CAFOs and the hydroponics.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just feel like, it's alarming when you see all of this, boatloads of grain coming out of Turkey and out of the Soviet Union, right, that are certified by Quality Assurance International, and they have no papers that prove that they're organic, and they've flooded the market. And then the big boys have figured out how to cheat on the domestic grain market, and QAI was certifying those guys too, right? So here we are, like where hydroponics, where you're using fractionated chemicals to grow your food instead of using real organic chemicals in the soil, right? And real critters, feeding your plants and getting fed by your plants, and, sucking up carbon from the atmosphere. I mean, like, hydroponics doesn't do any of that, you know. And I mean, with the CAFOs, like one of the things that we did when we did these cotton tours, since cotton and dairy are linked at the waist in all of the cotton growing states that also have CAFO dairies, because they feed out. See, I mean, on cotton fields, 60% of the yield of a cotton field is cottonseed, and only 30% is fiber, and another 10% is gin trash and linters, what they call linters, which are like these little tiny hairs that are right next to the seed. And so that 60% of that yield has to go somewhere, and it used to go into oil, but cottonseed oil got to be very unpopular. And so like about 80% of that cottonseed gets fed out to dairy cows at 10.5 pounds a day. Can't feed much more than that, because gossypol is poisonous to them at a higher level, right? This poisoning that cotton has in it, and oil poisoning, and causes, you know, it's an aflatoxin. And so, you know, if you go to a big dairy, they'll have mountains of cottonseed that they're feeding out to those cows every day, you know. And so a lot of them are like next door neighbors, you know, not very far to move that cottonseed, you know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of the dairies that are right near gins. And so it's, you know, those two industries are connected. So most of our tours, we would go to a big dairy. We just drive in with a 50-person bus and, you know, go right back to the lagoon. And then the owner would come back and say, "What are you guys doing here?" And we'd say, "Oh, I'm farm up in Crow's Landing, and we're showing some of these people that wanted to see what you guys are doing on dairy, and that you're using cottonseed, and they're all interested in cotton." And I said, "Oh, I'll show you some other stuff then." Same thing we would do at crop duster fields. We'd go to the crop duster field and, "Where are you going to spray next?" And they'd tell us, and we'd meet them there, and they'd show you exactly what they do. And the bus would get sprayed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because they're spraying all the time. It's drifting all over the place.
Yeah.
So, really, I mean, once people see that, you know, it's like, it's pretty hard to forget.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, there's so many, you know, damaged communities because of it. And now they've lost a huge part of that cotton market. That, you know, once those price drops happened and a lot of that stuff went offshore, because we used to ship to all these other companies. We used to ship 60% of our cotton out every year out of the United States.
Yeah.
And now we're down to about 400,000 acres in California on cotton. And we had 1.5 million.
Yeah. So one of the big revelations, I think, of the last 40 years has been the impact of agriculture on climate, and the impact of climate on agriculture we always knew about, but we're seeing it from the other side now, and I think it's a big part of the conversation. Can you remember, like, how long ago it was before that idea occurred to you?
Well, I, as you say, I've had a pretty checkered life. I've gotten to do a lot of things, and one of the things I got to do is after people started paying attention to cotton after we were doing the cotton project for a while. In 1993, I got appointed to the Montreal Protocol Commission on Ozone Depleting Substances, because I was working, like I say, using strawberries as an example. And since we were doing pesticide analysis on cotton, we also did it on strawberries and found out that they were using about 300 pounds an acre of pesticides and another 350 pounds of fertilizer per acre, right? And so one of the pesticides that they were using was methylbromide, which is a serious ozone polluter, right? probably the worst ozone polluter, worse than chlorofluorocarbons. And so I got appointed to that, and I met a bunch of climate scientists during that time, and they kept talking about, it's not just fossil fuels. It's like there are these industrial issues that we really need to look at. One of them is fertilizer manufacture. Another one is like just the movement of Earth, And so I, put that in the back of my head, and so I did that for about 2 or 3 years and got to go to several meetings and really learned a lot. And then
When was that?
that from about 93 to 2005. And then in 2006 and 7, I had gone to India in 2004 to speak at World Social Forum. Vandana Shiva had asked me if I'd come over and talk about cotton and how we could fix it, right? And how we could decrease the water and a whole bunch of stuff. And so I went over, and when we started talking a lot when I was there, because I spent a bunch of time with her, and she had already started thinking like, we really need to start pointing the finger at how much damage agriculture is doing to the environment and to how much impact it's having on climate. And so then after that, I came back and I thought about that a lot, but I was writing the book, The War on Bugs, and I finished that in 2006, and then it took about 2 years to get edited, and I had to go through and I had to fact check everything, and we had to make sure that we weren't stepping on people because we used all these ads, and so that took a long time to go through all that copyright process and everything. And so during that time, I started really thinking about climate change, and then we went to the slow food convivium in Italy in 2008, and Vandana Shiva and Debbie, what was it? Anyway, Vandana Shiva and Debbie Barker wrote a paper saying, look, we think 35% of greenhouse gases are coming from agriculture. And then in 2009, the next year, 2 World Bank scientists published a paper that said 51% of greenhouse gases are coming from animal agriculture alone, right? And this started a furor, a back and forth, arguing back and forth between all these scientists around the world about how much damage was being done with agriculture, right? Well, probably between 35 and 50% of greenhouse gases are coming from agriculture. And we're a terrible polluter. I mean, more and more I realized we really needed to write about this. And so I started writing about it, and people started relating to it. And I, got to speak all over the place. And now I really feel like people are really working on trying to, ameliorate some of those problems, really alleviate some of this nightmare that we've created for ourselves with basically a bad ag, where we too much soil disturbance, too much damage of biology. I mean, we really need to get the biology back to where it was, when the Native Americans were farming it. Because almost everybody knows that we had 8 to 10% organic matter, which is your biology, and so. And now, like when I took over this farm, it had 1%, and when I took over the farms out in California, they were down to 1%. We've damaged it badly and damaged a lot of the life, not just the earthworms, but. So yeah, we're just learning. We're learning kind of a microorganism agriculture, you know.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. I
It's
mean,
exciting.
I've always been excited about farming, and except when I was a kid, I thought it was really a hard job. Now that I'm an adult, I know it's a really hard job. But I've been able to do it for, since really I started farming before I went to jail, and been farming since I got out in '71.
Dinner must be served.
Just about ready.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah,
Well, Will Allen, thank you very much for talking tonight.
thanks a lot for asking me. I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to your neighbor. Now I get to see you once in a while. I hope that you didn't get a good recording. We'll do this again.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you're subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. So keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well so that others can find us. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. And you can join us every Thursday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. See you next time.